Hello everyone, welcome back to Comprehensive Science Remote Learning with Mr. Scull. Today we are going to continue our notes on proteins. If you recall, proteins, last time we found that they are made of the monomers called amino acids. Amino acids are joined together, if you remember the general structure, by their carboxylic acid and amino groups to form what's called a peptide bond. Now, just like all other polymers in biological macromolecules, the reaction that forms these polymers is called dehydration synthesis. And if we recall, we can really just kind of suss that out from its name, dehydration, removal of water, synthesis to make something new. So here we have a little picture that shows us a dehydration reaction. Um, Note what we're doing is we're taking the H and the OH, the H from the amino group, the OH from the carboxylic acid. That's going to get removed to form an HOH or H2O, water. And what's left is going to be a bond between the carbon and the nitrogen. That's a special bond called a peptide bond, which is why we call proteins poly, meaning many, peptides. Lots and lots and lots of peptide bonds form these proteins. Now, these proteins can be very, very long, from hundreds of amino acids to thousands of amino acids. So our question here, what does this process have in common with the formation of carbs and lipids that we've talked about previously? Give you guys a hint, it has to do with the reaction. All right, so dehydration synthesis takes us from two different amino acids to now one large molecule called a dipeptide. A dipeptide will then oftentimes undergo more and more dehydration synthesis to form larger and larger chains of amino acids. Now, proteins have four different layers of structure. Okay. Our first layer of structure, and I think that I referenced this previously, is just what order and which amino acids are present in the protein. So, you could have any number of those 20 amino acids that we showed a picture of earlier, and the order that they go in determines the nature of the protein. Why? Well, it has to do with the secondary structure. So if you remember, the R group of the amino acid is what determines the identity of the amino acid. And all of those R groups are different. Now, those R groups are attracted to or repulsed by different R groups. So certain amino acids like to cozy up to other amino acids, and then the other amino acids like to be far away from certain amino acids. So what this means is, as we have this long chain of polypeptide, certain amino acids are going to want to fold back to be attracted to other amino acids. Sometimes they fold, sometimes they twist, any number of things. That's called the secondary structure, which is the how do certain amino acids like to interact with one another. That's our secondary structure. Our tertiary structure is then when, based on what's called the chiral effects, which is just a fancy word for how it interacts in space with each other, that secondary structure is going to have certain forces that cause it to twist and bend in different shapes. That's called the tertiary structure. And then finally, the quaternary structure is when we actually have more than one chain of these amino acids that fit together in certain ways based on their tertiary structure. So those are the four different levels of structure of a protein. So here we're going to see a nice little picture of these different levels of protein structure. So we can see our primary sequence, or our primary structure, which is just the sequence is represented far on the left. Because of the ways that certain amino acids like to be attracted to each other. It's due to hydrogen bonding, which we've talked about before. They form this secondary structure. It could be coiling, like is shown here, and it could be a more of a folding effect as well. And then finally, in terms of a single chain, we have our tertiary structure. And this is because you're going to have large groups of amino acids that are attracted to other large groups of amino acids. And so we get this large scale folding. Finally, we have our quaternary structure, which is when we have more than one of these tertiary structures interacting with one another. And based on the shape of the tertiary structure, they're going to fit together in different ways. A great example of a quaternary structure is hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen in your blood. It's actually multiple proteins all smushed together based on their shape. One of the things that I like about this picture is it shows the folding versus the coiling. So here's our primary and secondary structures. Based on our primary structure, we're generally going to get either this pleated sheet on the left or this helix on the right. And there's terms for each. Here we can see that we actually have both in the tertiary protein structure. Some parts can be pleated sheets, and then other parts can be these alpha helices. But if we have multiples of these shoved together, that is our quaternary structure. Okay, where are we going to get our proteins from in terms of diet? Um, Animal protein is a big one. Um, it's probably one of the more common ways for us to get our proteins. Generally, dietary recommendations are lean sources of animal protein. When you see that word lean with protein, what that means is not fatty. So, for instance, a chicken breast is usually very lean. It's been butchered and cut in such ways to remove all the fat, and the cut itself is not fatty really at all. 98 or 99%, fat free in terms of how much fat is left on it. This would be in contrast to, let's say, a cut of steak like a ribeye. A ribeye has large pieces of fat running through it. A leaner cut of steak would be a filet mignon or a sirloin. They have considerably less fat. But dietary recommendation is 12% of your calories should be from proteins. And that doesn't have to come from meat. This can come from plant proteins as well. Literally anything that's alive has proteins in it. Beans and other legumes are great sources of protein. And a number of grains actually have lots and lots of protein. Uh, you can really see this in really chewy, kind of stretchy breads. They have a very high what's called gluten content, and gluten is a very important protein in plants. So some protein sources. These are all animal sources, obviously, but you can see that some are meat and other are kind of come from animals, such as the eggs and the milk. So, but we do also have, non-carnivorous kinds of protein sources. There's that little bit at the bottom there. It doesn't have as many amino acids. It's more about which amino acids are present. And if you are, fully vegetarian or vegan, it's just something that you want to consider to make sure that you're getting a complete kind of spectrum. Because recall that we cannot make all of the amino acids that we need based off of just kind of a willy-nilly diet. Animal proteins provide all of the amino acids that you're really going to need in terms of the essential ones. Um, but if you're just getting your protein from green sources, from veggies and fruits and legumes and things like that, you just want to make sure that you're getting all of the amino acids that you need. All right, and we will finish there. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys are checking your Schoology, your email, and submitting all your assignments. Thanks so much, and have a great day. Bye 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 bye.